The following is a production of Stevenson Media. Want to tip the host? Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Get a free Houston Sports State of the Union podcast t-shirt with a donation of $50 or more.
This is the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson.
My goodness, thank you so much, and please be seated. My fellow Houstonians, welcome to this Houston Sports State of the Union address for the week of December 15th. I am the self-appointed president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson. As always, there are a million different things you could be doing this evening, but you chose to spend a little bit of time with me, and I appreciate it. On tonight's show, the Houston Rockets, I got the wrong notes up here. The Houston Rockets and the Houston Texans have both been dominating with their defenses, but is it going to be enough to get them to their ultimate goals? The Texans are headed to Arrowhead Stadium to face the Kansas City Chiefs, a nemesis that they have not beaten in quite some time, a thorn in their side, the defending Super Bowl champs. The question is, how important is this game now that the Texans have won their division? We'll talk about that. The Houston Rockets got back to work after a disappointing loss in the NBA Cup. Semifinal, they had a week off and they looked really refreshed when they came back. They blew out the Pelicans, but once again, their inconsistent offense has us begging the question, is their dominant defense going to be enough? We will also talk some Houston Astros. We got some news that they signed a new player today, and it's official that Kyle Tucker is a Cub. He did his press conference. With these new moves going on, the question is what is next for the Astros. We will discuss that as well. But as always, I want to remind you of the ways you can support this show. One of them you're doing right now. You're watching, you're listening. Hopefully by now you are sharing with your friends, your family. Please remind them to follow, like, subscribe wherever they get their podcast fix. You can find the video on X. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it now on Instagram. You can find the video also on my YouTube channel, obviously, where the majority of you are watching. If you don't like watching your podcast and you prefer to listen, you can find Houston Sports State of the Union podcasts wherever you get your podcast fix, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. The show is available in all of those places. So that's the number one way you could support me, is by subscribing and please sharing with your fellow Houston sports fans. Now, there's also a QR code here in the corner if you are watching the video, if you are listening to the audio, or you can't scan this QR code. I will leave a link in the description after this live is over where you can find my tip jar. If you'd like to leave a tip, anything you leave me will go right back into this show to continue bringing you great content, and I will really appreciate it. If you leave a donation of $50 or more, I will send you some Houston Sports State of the Union podcast swag, t-shirt, hat, hoodie, whatever it is you prefer. Just remember to please screenshot that donation because they do come in anonymously. Screenshot that donation and either send it to my email, hsstateoftheunionpod@gmail.com, or if you're following me on my socials, which you should be anyway, go ahead and hit me up in my DMs and let me know that you left that donation. Another way, I will have affiliate links in the description of this video or audio that you're listening to once this live is over. Those affiliate links will be either for Houston Sports fan gear or for the equipment that I am using to bring you this podcast. Many people have asked me, hey, Nick, how do you podcast? What do I need to get? Well, I have everything that I use for this show in those affiliate links. If you choose to purchase anything from those affiliate links, I will get a little bit of change from that, and it'll be much, much appreciated. Lastly, I do have some sponsorship available, spots available, not only for this show, Houston Sports State of the Union, but if you're interested in sponsoring the Twin Toros, which is a Houston Texans podcast that I do in collaboration with ESPN Houston and 713 Houston Sports. I would appreciate and would love to represent your business on either one of those shows or both of them if you'd like to. So if you're interested in advertising your business, please reach out to me at hsstateoftheunionpod@gmail.com. Or once again, if you're following me on my socials, then you can hit me up in my DMs and we can talk about me representing your business and us growing our businesses together. Those are all the ways you can support the show. But like I said, the number one way you're doing right now, and I appreciate so much. So let's get into it. Let's start with the state of the Houston Texans. All right, the Houston Texans got a pretty big win against Miami last week. The reason it was big is because we've talked about for weeks now that this 3-game stretch where they're playing 3 games in 10 days, it would be really important for them to get off to a good start. Another reason it was important for them to win that game is because they did have an opportunity to finally clinch the AFC South, which, because they beat the Dolphins and the Colts lost their game to the Broncos, the Texans are back-to-back AFC South champions. Now, that's all good news. The bad news is that the offense was still not good. They just weren't good. I think they had 181 yards total offense. They only ran for 77 yards. 35 of that was because of a fake punt return by Dario Gumbawale. The offensive line had trouble protecting C.J. Stroud. He was sacked 4 times. And once again, like I said, they only ran for 77 yards. There was not a whole lot of running lanes for Joe Mixon, who has not had a decent running game in a few games now. So that is a little bit concerning. However, the defense was incredible. They picked off Tua Tagovailoa 3 times. I believe they had 3 sacks as well. I forgot to write down that stat. They sacked him a couple of times. I do know that. The defense was almost perfect. And unfortunately, this offense has kept putting the Houston Texans defense in a situation where they have to be perfect if they want to win a game. How many games have we saw that the defense giving up 1, maybe 2 plays has been the difference between a win and a loss? We saw that in the Jets game, unfortunately. We saw that in the loss to the Titans, unfortunately. The offense just can't muster up enough the offense can't muster up and score enough points for the defense to be able to give up the occasional big play, which they have been prone to doing. But we did not see any of those in this game versus Miami Dolphins. The great news was that, Tyreek Hill, that was the one person in this game who really scared me because, as I said, the Texans have been prone to giving up big plays, but he really didn't have a great day at all. Derek Stingley did a great job on him. There was a couple of times he was matched up against Kamari Lassiter, and Lassiter did well on him. He really didn't do anything. He had a couple of catches. I forgot to pull up how many yards he had. It doesn't matter. He did not have a good game, and you win the game 20-12. So the question is, now that you've wrapped up the division, you still have to play 2 more games in the next 6 days now, if I'm not mistaken, or 4 days. The Texans play Kansas City tomorrow, and then on Christmas, they will be playing the Baltimore Ravens. And I asked this question on the last 2 episodes now of the Twin Toros podcast, which, once again, if you guys are not familiar, Twin Toros podcast, we do reaction videos after the games on ESPN Houston's YouTube channel, and we do our preview videos on Ruben's channel, 713 Houston Sports. So we just put out a preview for tomorrow's game on 713 Houston Sports. You guys, when you get an opportunity, go ahead and check that out. But the question is, now that you've won the division and I'm looking at the seeding, mathematically, the Texans have a chance to be the 2nd seed. A bunch of stuff is going to have to happen in order for them to get the 2nd seed. Not only do they need to win out, but a bunch of other people are going to have to lose also. It's just not very likely. So there is a chance you can get the number 3 seed. However, whether you're the 3 or the 4 seed, no matter what, you're going to be playing a road. If you win your home game, if you win the wild card game, you're going to be playing on the road in your 2nd game. So the Texans, if they want to advance to the AFC Championship game for the first time in their franchise history, they're going to have to do something they've never done before, and that's win a playoff game on the road, no matter what. Either in Buffalo, more than likely, or in Kansas City, more than likely. There is a scenario where they can dodge Kansas City until the AFC Championship game, but you got to get there before we cross that bridge, right? So I had this argument with my fellow Twin Toro, Ruben Calavillo. I told him the next 3 games really don't matter. Well, I say they don't. Once you are mathematically eliminated from being able to be in the 2nd seed, which will probably be the case after tomorrow, whether you win or lose, you will probably be mathematically eliminated from being able to be the 2nd seed. But once that happens, you really don't have anything to play for. There's really no difference between the 3 seed and the 4 seed. So once it's going to be determined that you're either the 3 or the 4, at what point do the Houston Texans start thinking about resting some of their players? Mainly the ones that they really can't afford to lose in a playoff game, i.e. CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, Will Anderson Jr., Daniil Hunter, and I would venture to say even Azeez Al-Shaair, who's been suspended anyway. Maybe they need to play him in that last game versus the Titans so he gets some rhythm. Or maybe 4 days off or 4 weeks off is exactly what he needs to be ready to dominate in the playoffs. I'm not entirely sure. But at some point, the Houston Texans need to consider resting players if they don't have anything else to play for in the regular season. Now, the reason Ruben disagrees with me on this is because he believes that the Texans need to play these games and hopefully win these games in order for the narrative around the league to change about the Houston Texans not being able to beat good teams. Now, once again, if the Texans had a chance to advance to the 2 seed or the 1 seed, I would be right on board with him. But like I said, they're not going to get the 2 seed more than likely, and the 3 and the 4 seed are pretty much the same thing. And yes, I care about the narrative around the Houston Texans. I care about the history they have of not being able to beat good teams. Right now, though, I don't give a damn about it in the regular season. I just don't. We've said all along, no matter what the regular season record is, no matter who they beat, who they lose to, if the Texans do not win 2 playoff games this year, then this season is a failure. Period. Whether they're 12-5 or whether they're, they only win 10 games and they lose the rest of these. 10-7 is what the record would be. Regardless of what their record is, if they don't win 2 playoff games, it's all for naught. So, the best chance you have of winning 2 playoff games is going into the playoffs as healthy as possible. So, that means that if you have anybody who's a little bit banged up, why would you play him in any of these 3 games? Right now on the injury list, you have Christian Harris already injured an ankle in his first game back. We saw Joe Mixon got a hip drop tackle. He's been dealing with nagging injuries this entire time. You got Foley Fatukasi, who is not going to be playing tomorrow because of his injury. But if you got guys who are banged up and there's a chance they could get hurt even worse than they are, why play them so that you can say you beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season? I don't care if you beat them in the regular season at this point. And that's my thing. Like, I understand the emotional part for the fans, but at the same time, I don't give a damn if you beat the Ravens or the Chiefs in a meaningless regular season game. I want you to beat them in the playoffs in January. That's when it matters. And so I want them to be as healthy as possible. I don't know where that moment is where you decide, hey, I'm going to start resting people. Like I said, mathematically, you still have a chance to go for the 2nd seed. So I would play everybody who's available and healthy to play tomorrow versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But I would reevaluate after that, depending on what happens. If you beat them and let's say the Ravens lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow, what's to say you don't rest some players on Christmas? I mean, that'll be the 2nd game once again in 4 or 5 days. It's a really risky proposition. And all I'm saying, and most people disagreed with me, we talked about it on the ESPN show and we talked about it on the Houston Sportscast, 713 Houston Sportscast show. And everybody disagreed with me. Everybody said, oh, you can't be scared. You got to play. We have to beat the Chiefs and we have to beat the Ravens because the offense hasn't been playing well and we got to change the narrative about who the Houston Texans are. You know how you change the narrative about who the Houston Texans are? You don't just win a wild card game and then flame out in the second round. And your best chance to do that is being as healthy as possible. And if anybody important gets hurt in the next 3 meaningless games, if you disagree with the fact that I'm saying at some point they need to start resting, then you're not going to be able to come back later and say, oh, well, why were they playing? D'Amico Ryan should have rested him. No, you want him to play the whole thing out? Then let him play the whole thing out and come what may. But don't say if Nico Collins hurts himself and is not available for the playoffs, don't say the Texans don't have an excuse if they don't win in the playoffs. Because the excuse that they'll have is they didn't have their best wide receiver. Joe Mixon has been the MVP of this team. God forbid, and I'm knocking on all the wood I can find in my studio here. If Joe Mixon were to get hurt and not be available for the playoffs, you're cooked. You're not going to win. You probably won't even win the home game without Joe Mixon. So that's my only point. Like, get in the playoffs, be as healthy as possible. Beating the Ravens and the Chiefs for pride in the regular season is irrelevant. Beat them in the playoffs for something that matters. Get to an AFC championship game and win that. Go to the Super Bowl. I don't think the Texans are going to be favored to beat Kansas City tomorrow or in the postseason. The Texans were favorites when it was thought that Patrick Mahomes might not play, but apparently he is going to be good to go. So it's going to be both teams at relative full strength. The Texans do have some injuries to Cade Stover. Like I said, Foley Fatukasi won't be playing. That's a big loss for me because he's very, very good against the run. And while the Chiefs haven't been running the ball incredibly well this season, you have, Dante Pacheco, you have Kareem Hunt. They have the ability to run, and it's the Chiefs, man. You can't take anything for granted against them. Not only do you have to beat them, but you have to beat the referees too. So my thing is give it your best shot. If you're getting blown out by halftime tomorrow, which I hope doesn't happen, I don't think it's going to happen because nobody's blown out the Texans all year. This defense is going to keep them in any game for the most part, other than the Vikings. But if you're getting blown out at halftime, I would consider sending Mills out there and see if he can throw a few passes to Mechie and see if you can get Mechie's rhythm going for the next game and hopefully into the playoffs. Do not put out the players that you need to be healthy in the playoffs in a game that means nothing. And that's my only point. Where do you guys land on it? I don't see anybody in the chat, but if you guys check out this video later or you listen to the audio later, go onto the socials, go into the Houston Sports Nation Facebook page. You guys can leave your thoughts there. Also, if you guys are doing a game day party tomorrow, if you guys are doing watch-alongs, wherever you're watching the game, man, take your pics. Let me see you decked out in your Houston Texans gear and put those on that fan page, the Houston Sports Nation fan page on Facebook. If you're not following that page, then you should be. That's where we all interact with one another. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Texans resting their players. I would say the state of the Texans is good. They're still in a position to do something they've never done before. They need to be healthy to do it. That's just my opinion. They should prioritize that over a relatively meaningless regular season game. All right, let's move on now to the state of the Houston Rockets. All right, the Houston Rockets beat the New Orleans Pelicans last night, 133-113. They looked amazing. Okay, it's the Pelicans. Pelicans suck. But that's mostly due to the fact that pretty much everyone on their team is injured. But still, the Rockets look rejuvenated after a week off, after a really disappointing loss to the OKC Thunder in the NBA Cup. Last night, the Rockets shot 43% from three-point range, 17 of 39. Many of them are wide open shots, but that's because that's how people are playing the Rockets. They're leaving them wide open because they can't hit wide open shots. But they did last night, and it was impressive. What impressed me the most about this win, and this is something that I want to see more often from this Rockets offense, they assisted on 34 of their 50 made shots. The ball movement was really impressive. Jalen Green was really good. He was attacking the basket. He was dunking on people. He went 13 of 22 from the field, shot 4 of 10 from 3 points. He was doing everything that Rockets fans want him to do on a consistent basis. Unfortunately, and I'm going to call it now, The Rockets play on Sunday against Toronto. Jalen Green's probably going to score 9 points or less. Just because. It's frustrating, and I'm not trying to be negative. Maybe he won't because Toronto sucks, but Jalen just has not been a consistent offensive player. Thank goodness he's been very consistent defensively. I'm very impressed by his defense. I'm impressed by the team defense as a whole, but the team's offense is not impressing me, and it's making me wonder, is Ime Udoka going to be able to fix this? Or is he just one of those defensive-minded coaches who knows how to coach defense and doesn't really prioritize the offensive side of the ball? The Houston Rockets have had a coach like that before. If you'll recall, after Rudy Tomjanovich had to retire, the Rockets hired Jeff Van Gundy. And Jeff Van Gundy, coming from the Knicks, and keep in mind, this was an era, Jeff Van Gundy coached the Knicks in the late 90s. He coached the Rockets in the early 2000s. This was still a time in the NBA where defense ruled. Scoring was not very high. These teams scored in the 70s, the 80s. Like if you let a team score 100 points on you in the 90s and the early 2000s, then you were just trash on defense. Like you were just considered a dumpster fire defensive team if somebody scored 100 points on you, which is insane. Because if you don't score 100 points now, there are no teams that aren't scoring 100 points. Even the worst teams in the league are averaging 100 points or more. The Rockets average more than 100 points a game, and they're one of the worst offensive teams in the league. That's just the way the game is now. But at that time, even when scoring was low, defense was priority, the Houston Rockets, with Jeff Van Gundy as their coach, were still one of the best defensive teams in the league. But at times, similar to this Rockets team now, they look like they didn't even practice offense. The offense was give it to Yao, run pick and roll with Yao and either Francis or McGrady, or have McGrady or Francis, whatever era it was. Jeff Van Gundy only coached Steve Francis and Coutinho Mobley for one season. But play pick and roll or let them break down the defense. Now, I'm pretty sure Jeff Van Gundy wanted more ball movement than he got from Steve Francis. But I thought Steve Francis actually had a really good season under Jeff Van Gundy. And I wasn't surprised that he traded Steve Francis because he got Tracy McGrady. And Tracy McGrady was arguably the best player in the league, if not the second best. Was the second or the first best, or the best, player in the league at the time. But I digress. Whether it was Francis, whether it was Tracy McGrady, in the Jeff Van Gundy era, the Rockets offense just wasn't good. They couldn't score. Now, to be fair, they also had a trash roster. I'm sorry. I was watching the video today of Tracy McGrady's miraculous 13 points and 33 seconds. There was a reason they were down by 14 or 12, whatever it was, with less than a minute to go to the Spurs, because this was their starting lineup. You had Yao Ming, which Yao Ming was very good. You had Tracy McGrady, obviously. That's your two stars. Starting at point guard for that game was Bob Sura. Your power forward was Juwan Howard, an older, less athletic Juwan Howard. And your starting three-man small forward was Ryan Bowen. That was your starting lineup in that game. That's who Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming had to try to win a championship with. Now, to be fair, Jim Jackson was on that team, and Jim Jackson was still a pretty good player, a decent shooter, but he was hurt a lot during that season, and he was actually hurt for that game versus the Spurs. But my point is that offensively, they didn't really have a whole lot to work with anyway. Bob Sura was good penetrator, disher. He could dunk when he was younger, but he wasn't a good shooter. There just were no good shooters on that team. There was no scorers other than Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming. So eventually it got old, and the Rockets decided they needed to change. Van Gundy decided he needed to change. And when they decided Van Gundy was going to be gone, they said, hey, we need a coach that knows how to coach offense. So they went with Rick Adelman, who had been coaching the Sacramento Kings. If you watch the Sacramento Kings of the early 2000s, you know that they were a very exciting offensive team. He ran a motion offense where the players were constantly moving, the ball was constantly moving, fast breaks where the ball never got dribbled. It was a very exciting style of basketball. So he brought that to the Houston Rockets, and they kept many of their defensive principles that they learned under Jeff Van Gundy, and the Houston Rockets became a pretty damn good team. Unfortunately, we know the story. Tracy McGrady, Yao Ming constantly hurt, so they didn't really win anything. But once they had offense and defense together, they became one of the best teams in the league. At one point, they won 22 straight games. You guys know the story if you're a Houston Rockets fan. So, Ime Udoka, is he going to be the next Jeff Van Gundy? A coach who makes the Rockets dominant on defense, but is unable to get them to be a dominant or even halfway decent offensive team. I don't think so, and this is why. When Ime was in Boston, Boston had a pretty good offense. Boston just had guys who could shoot and who could score the ball. And he had some vets on that team. Yes, he had young guys, but there were also vets on there that were decent scorers and decent shooters. There's a lot of parallels to this team, to that Boston Celtics team. Although I would say that Boston Celtics team, maybe it wasn't as deep with young talent, but when you get into some of the role players and when you get into some of the veterans that were on that team, I would venture to say, Al Horford, probably a better vet than Jeff Green right now. Yeah, it's one of those things, man, that I'm not completely sold that Udoka isn't going to be able to figure this out. It's not going to be a coaching issue. It's going to be, can the players develop the way they need to develop, and can they start just shooting the ball better? Jabari Smith Jr. needs to shoot the ball better. Jalen Green needs to be more consistent offensively. He needs to be more consistently aggressive. Like some games, he's attacking the basket, he's getting good shots, he's moving around, and then there's other games where you don't even know he's on the court. And it's tough. Fred VanVleet is what Fred VanVleet is. Sometimes he's going to make his shots, sometimes he's not. But he keeps the offense organized. He's good at making sure everybody is where they need to be. You know what you're going to get from him. If the Rockets are going to take the next step, they need the young guys that they have on their team to develop and take that next step. And I think Ime Udoka is the right coach for this team. I don't think they will need to make a change. Look, he's only in his second year. I just feel like if in 2-3 years of him coaching, they're still not at least middle of the pack offensively, then maybe you need to make a change. But we'll see. And we'll see what the roster looks like in 3-4 years. Maybe some of these guys who are struggling to be consistent offensively won't be on this team anymore, and they'll be replaced with people who can be offensively consistent. We'll see. I think we've seen glimpses, though, like this game against New Orleans. This game was a glimpse of what the Rockets could be. Listen, if the Rockets figure out a way to be even like halfway, we'll say middle of the pack, maybe top 15, top 10 offensively, and they do it and they do it while they're playing defense as good as they are, look out. They'll be one of the best teams in the league. I mean, they're already a very, very good team because of the way that they play defense. If they can be consistent offensively, just a little bit better than they are, they're going to be a really good team. And if they could find a way to creep into that top 10 offense and stay as a top 2, top 5 defense, then that's going to be the team that Houston Rockets fans have been hoping for years now. And I think they have a chance to do that. We got to be patient with them. You guys know me. I'm a very, very patient Houston sports fan. But all in all, the state of the Houston Rockets is strong. They got some really young players. They have almost a problem with they have too much talent. I think that there's some players that aren't playing right now that would be probably, if not starting on other teams, would probably be definitely getting rotation minutes on other teams. I mean, Cam Whitmore has barely seen the floor this year. Up until recently, Aaron Holiday hadn't been playing. So I'm really optimistic about the Houston Rockets. I think the state of the Rockets is strong, and I can't wait to see what they do with the rest of this season. I can't wait to see Houston Rockets playing meaningful basketball in May. Hopefully, maybe even as far as June. We'll see. But the state of the Houston Rockets is strong, man, and it's really, really exciting. All right, let's move on to the state of the Houston Astros. Pardon me, I was getting a little bit of cotton mouth there. All right, the Astros have signed first baseman Christian Walker. He's a former first baseman for the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is right on the heels of them trading away Kyle Tucker to the Cubs. Walker is a career .793 on-base percentage guy. He hit 26 home runs last season, and he feels a need at first base for sure. He's a Gold Glover winner 3 times, so he's got a good glove over there. You know you're going to have good defense on first base, which was lacking with Jose Abreu and or John Singleton. So no doubt, I would say this move, in conjunction with the fact that you traded Tucker away and you got Isaac Paredes. I said his name wrong last week, by the way. I called him Isaac. Apparently, it's pronounced Isaac. Isaac Paredes. I think that makes it pretty clear that Alex Bregman's not coming back. Which is, I don't understand what exactly the Astros are trying to do. Because you trade Tucker for the Cubs' #1 prospect. And you bring Isaac Paredes, who's a good player, but he's not, he's not a difference maker. He'd be a good role player on this team. Well, on this team, he might be one of your main important players. But on Astros teams in the past, he would be batting like in the bottom third of the lineup. He might be batting in the top 6 of the lineup on the team next year. So that move says, hey, we're trying to go young and we're resetting. But I know you only signed Christian Walker to a 3-year, $60 million deal, that's the type of contract that Jim Crane wants to sign. He ain't doing none of these 13-year, $500 billion. He's not doing that. And we've talked about that in the past. We talked about it all season. When I told you guys that they're probably not going to bring Kyle Tucker back. They're not going to pay Bregman. And I told you guys why. At the time, they had almost $100 million tied up on the injury list. Right now, it's $60 million. And guess what? They're still playing Jose Abreu. They're still paying Jose Abreu. Excuse me. They're just not going to be in the business of spending stupid money. So they're going to have to try to moneyball this thing for a little while. This move to get Christian Walker says we're trying to win now. Trading away Kyle Tucker for a prospect and a decent infielder and a decent pitcher who I don't know if why am I not remembering the pitcher's name? I do names all the time. Good thing I have my notes from last week right in front of me. Wisniewski. Hayden Wisniewski. He might be in the starting rotation for this team. I mean, he's been a bullpen guy. I don't know exactly what the Astros are doing. Maybe we'll find out because I'm sure they're not done making moves. There's a rumor that they tried to get Nolan Arenado, and he declined his no trade clause because he didn't want to come here. Getting Nolan Arenado to me would be like the equivalent of signing Jose Abreu. Like, he's a declining player. He plays a really important defensive position. He's lost his bat. He's not as great on defense anymore. And he makes too much money. So it just sends mixed messages. If you're trying to sign him, why? Are you trying to win next year? Are you trying to hit the reset button? Or, and this feels very Drayton McClain-ish, are you trying to dangle out in front of the fans like, hey, we're trying to be competitive? And then you're going to put a mediocre team out there that either just misses the playoffs or gets into the first round and gets smoked, but you sell a lot of tickets and you sell a lot of concessions, so you're happy. I hope Jim Crane will not fall into that trap. Uncle Drayton McClain, he fell into that trap and he didn't even win the World Series. He just got to the World Series once and he got comfortable. And then he started dealing out bad contracts, which, to be fair to the Astros, the bad contracts they have right now are not on Dana Brown. They're kind of on they're not. Well, Jeff Luhnow did some bad contracts too, but Dana Brown didn't. I fully believe that the Jose Abreu signing was 100% a Jeff Bagwell move. I guess it goes on Dana Brown's resume, but a lot of these bad contracts, this Lance McCullers contract, dude hasn't played in like 15 years. It feels like that's not on Dana Brown. So I don't know. It's just really, really strange. I don't know what they're trying to do. We'll find out if they move Presley, if they decide to move on from Fromber. That will be confusing because if you're doing that, then why are you signing? I mean, this is probably the most coveted first baseman. I know the Yankees wanted him. They wanted Christian Walker. So I don't quite know what they're trying to do. All I know is that the Astros, they're going to moneyball this thing. They're not going to be the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers, as much as some Astros fans want them to be. And if that's what you want them to be honest with you, I feel like you're the newbies. Listen, man, the good news about if the Astros do take a few steps back, I wouldn't be mad. Number one, I think they need to retool, and I think that means that they can be competitive sooner than later. So maybe you have a couple of seasons where you're not going to the ALCS in consecutive years, but you're rebuilding your farm system, and that'll be great because I think your window for championship opens back up sooner. Another great thing about that, and I was talking to my buddy Chris Kahn about this just last night, if the Astros suck, then tickets will be a lot cheaper and concessions will be a lot cheaper. If you were around when the Astros are losing 100 games a season, you know that tickets were cheap. They were giving away beer and hot dogs. It was great if you just wanted to go catch a game. The on-the-field product sucked, but you could probably take your whole family for less than $100. I can't remember the last time I went to any stadium in this town and did not spend at minimum $300. And that's just for me and my wife. If I take the kids, oh my goodness, like let's not even go there. But all I'm saying is if you used to rock with this team back when they sucked, then you're going to be okay with them taking a step back. If all you've known is the Houston Astros going to the World Series, going to the ALCS, this is about to be really hard for you. Your fanhood is going to be tested because listen, man, if you were a fan of this team when Dave Borkowski was the best pitcher on the team, if you were wearing a Carlos Lee jersey or a Miguel Tejada jersey, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But if you jumped on this bandwagon back in 2015 and all you've known is a winning Astros team, this is going to be difficult for you. And some of you aren't going to make it. Some of you will fall off the bandwagon and you might start cheering for the Rangers again or whoever is winning that excites you. But the Houston Astros, they had a really good run, man. They won 2 World Series in the last 10 years. They're a smart organization. I say the state of the Houston Astros is strong. It is in a little bit of flux because I don't quite know what they're trying to do. But clearly they're going to be smart with their money. And I think they probably need to get rid of the contracts of Jose Abreu whenever they're done paying him to not play. Whenever they're done paying Lance McCullers to not play. When they're done paying Lance McCullers to not play. Excuse me. And then once they free up, get some of that albatross off of their back, that dead rhino weight off their back, and they have some good prospects, some good young prospects, they'll probably do what they did in the last decade. Add some smart, good players at reasonable price. And then hopefully, be back in the ALCS and be back in the World Series before another decade passes. I think the best chance for them to do that is to be smart, get the best prospects they can for some of their good players. I think the obvious move right now is to trade Presley. You consider moving Fromber too. Everybody who says, oh, don't trade Fromber, it's because you think the Astros are still trying to win the World Series. I think the Astros are trying to be competitive. Nothing that they've done this offseason says to me they're trying to win the World Series next year. If that's what you're expecting, you're going to be very, very, very sad because that's not what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to be competitive, just competitive enough that they keep selling tickets, that you have hope that they might get to the playoffs. But ultimately, they're just going to be probably a middle of the road team. And that's okay if it's with a purpose. You know, when Jeff Luhnow was here, the one thing he did with Houston Astros fans, he was very honest with them. He said, look, bro, we're going to suck. But after we suck, we're going to win the World Series. And that's exactly what they did. So Houston Astros fans, we might have to deal with the Astros sucking for a little bit. I mean, the roster's still decent. You still got Yordan. Hopefully Jose Altuve doesn't just completely fall off of a cliff. But there's definitely some holes on this team. And I think if the Astros can find inexpensive, reasonably contract and good players to fill those holes with, they'll do it. You've got Anthony Santander out there who could play outfield. You've got Jackson Profar, could play a little bit of outfield, a little bit of infield. You got options. And then you hope some of the guys who, you know, you hope McCormick can get back to his 2022, 2023 ways. You hope maybe you get Garcia back and he's pitching well. We'll see what happens, man. I don't know. It doesn't feel like they're trying to win the World Series, but they might surprise me. It's baseball, man. Whatever happens, happens. But I say the State of the Union in Houston is still strong. The Astros have given us a great decade. If they take a few steps back for a while, they've deserved it. They earned it. Let's give them some patience. They deserve for us to let them figure this thing out. And hopefully they'll be building a new championship team very, very soon. The Houston Rockets, young, exciting, play great defense, occasionally play really good offense. They're still, the third or fourth seeded team in the league right now, and they're probably going to make the playoffs. And so that's exciting. And then the Houston Texans, once again, still have an opportunity to do something they've never done before, and that's win 2 playoff games. But hopefully they will go into the playoffs healthy to give them the best chance to do that. All right, guys, I really appreciate everybody who watches this video, listens to the audio. Once again, I want to remind you of the ways to support the show. You're doing one of them right now. You're watching, you're listening. Hopefully by now you've shared with your friends, your family. Please remind them, follow, like, subscribe, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Spotify, Apple Music, whether it be on Amazon Music, YouTube Music, anywhere you watch or listen to podcasts, man. Just please follow. I'll have my link tree in the description so you guys can follow all the socials. Make sure you're also following the Twin Toros podcast. If you're a Houston Texans fan, I have a really good time doing that show with Ruben Calvillo. Speaking of Ruben, let me also let you guys know that tomorrow at Tejas Brewery, we will be doing a watch party for the Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Houston Stressens is going to be out there. Harley Dugan is going to be out there. Obviously Ruben, myself, AD of the H-Town Rundown will be there. Several of the local Houston sports YouTubers and digital content creators will be at this live watch party, and we'll be having a good time. Ruben's probably going to do the play-by-play because that's what he does. He's great at it. And if you guys have a chance to get out there to Tejas Brewery, you will want to RSVP. The RSVP is actually right there. Go to HoustonStressens.com and you can RSVP. Let them know that you'll be there tomorrow. If you're looking for somewhere to watch the game, somewhere with good eats, good drinks, some good company, then you guys come on down to Tejas Brewery tomorrow. We'll probably be up there about 10:30. I think we start going live at 11 o'clock. I'm not going to be live the entire time. I'm just going to be there enjoying the game, enjoying the company. I might hop on the live with them for a few minutes. But if you guys don't have anything to do, anywhere to watch the game tomorrow, come on out to Tejas Brewery and see all of us do the play-by-play for the game. And hopefully we'll be watching the Houston Texans win over the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not going to spoil the Twin Toros. When you're done watching this, go watch the Twin Toros, and I gave my score prediction for the game. But once again, thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm going to see you guys for the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast next Wednesday. I'll be doing the post-game show of the Twin Toros. ESPN, they're taking the holidays off, so our post-game show will actually be on 713 Houston Sports. That'll be Tuesday, 7:30. You guys don't forget to check that out. And in the meantime, you know what I want you to do? I want you to stay 10 toes down for H-Town. I love you. Good night.
This has been the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, hosted by Nick Stevenson. Tune in next week for more news and analysis of your favorite Houston teams. Please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, the app formerly known as Twitter, if that's even really still a thing. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.